Newtown, Connecticut, 3 children, 2 teachers will be laid to rest, along with the Sandy Hook Elementary School principal, Don Hucksprung. The mass shooting has put a focus on gun violence in this country, a subject that President Obama says will now be at the forefront of his administration moving forward. Listen.
So I will use all the powers of this office to help advance efforts aimed at preventing more tragedies like this. We won't prevent them all, but that can't be an excuse not to try. It won't be easy, but that can't be an excuse not to try. And I'm not going to be able to do it by myself. Ultimately, if this effort is to succeed, it's going to require the help of the American people.
Yesterday, a citizens group in Newtown, Connecticut, that's pushing for strengthened gun control measures, met to speak with the residents who'd gone to Washington, D.C. and discuss gun legislation. And Senator Richard Blumenthal was at that meeting. He's a Democratic senator from the state of Connecticut. It's nice to have you with us this morning.
Thank you, Soledad.
Appreciate your time. So they've called for sensible legislation. What does that mean to them, and what does that mean to you?
It means beginning with some common sense, common ground solution, ban on assault weapons of the type that was used in this horrific massacre, as well as high-capacity magazines, also enabling this killing to take place. Better background checks. Right now, only 60% of all sales involve any background checks, and improving those background checks, and of course, keeping guns out of the hands of deranged people, and mental health efforts, outreach and better treatment for people who may suffer from some kind of mental illness, and perhaps some approach to cultural violence, the celebration of violence in the media. But there's no one single, simple solution to this problem, and nothing that will prevent all of them, perhaps. But as the president said so forcefully yesterday and Sunday night at the vigil, where he spoke powerfully to the families and first responders, as well as others of us who were there, we need to try, we need to do something. And that's what I'm hearing from all the families, as well as the law enforcement people around the state.
There's some people who would say, by focusing on the assault weapons, a ban on assault weapons, at the end of the day removes 2 to maybe 8% of what the violence. That the bulk of the violence is actually handguns. And to not take a look at handguns really leaves a massive portion of where the actual violence is taking place, you know, sort of unchallenged. Would you agree with that, and what would you do about that?
I do agree that handguns are a threat on the streets of big cities like Bridgeport, Hartford, New York, killing children. And the president is right to focus on our children who were the victims of this horrific massacre last Friday, but also day by day, the drive-by shootings in many of these big cities. And so better tracing, better kinds of apprehension of stolen handguns, often the source of violence in our big cities. And law enforcement will tell you, and I've worked with them for 20 years as the state's attorney general, before that as a federal prosecutor in Connecticut, that the proliferation of handguns is a major threat to them as well as to our children.
Senator, can I ask you, I mean, I thought the things you mentioned were a very good list, but it's the same 5 things that we talk about every time this sort of thing happens. Do you think it's going to be any different this time? And I think that you, especially, you know, coming from Connecticut, are in a powerful position to take the lead on a lot of this stuff, and I know you're trying to do that. But what about it is going to be different this time?
What's different about it is the victims. These children, I think, are different not only in number, but age and innocence. And of course, the teachers. Yesterday, I went to the funeral of Vicky Soto, a beautiful young woman with riveting blue eyes and a dedication to her children, who stepped in front of the killer, trying to protect them. And today, tragically, there are more funerals, more calling hours, such as I've attended. I think they've really captured the nation's attention, and we need to seize this moment. That's why Senator Feinstein and I have moved ahead forcefully, even during this period of mourning, because we need to bring together the movement in the community, which is articulated by Newtown United. I met with them in my office in Washington, and then again last night in Newtown. And I think that we are at a historic moment.
How will we know? What will we know if it's different? I mean, you know, at what point can citizens say, you know, it's taking too long, or, you know, the NRA is slow walking this stuff again? I mean, it seems to me that, you know, every time we say it's going to be different also, I mean, that's another similarity.
I was going to say, because we had that same conversation after Columbine, which I covered. We had that same conversation after Aurora, which I covered, and all the other ones in between.
Remember that the first gun assault weapons law, took 5 years to pass. It was first proposed in 1989 after the Stockton shooting.
Right.
And Senators Metzenbaum and Feinstein and DeConcini worked on it for 5 years. I'm determined, I'm committed, but the President's absolutely right that the American people have to stand up. I'll tell you what also is different. You know, I've talked to a lot of these families, and I am so impressed by their strength and courage, and they say to me, we want to be there. We want this work to go forward.
Senator, CNN reported last night that there are tens of thousands of criminals who have lied on their background checks, that the FBI has identified and turned over to the Department of Justice, and they simply haven't been prosecuted. In terms of enforcing laws on the books, what can the administration and the Senate do now, irrespective of new legislation?
Excellent point. And as a law enforcer, and that's what most of my career was about, I know that we need not only to improve existing laws and close these loopholes, the gun show loophole, but also better enforcement. The best laws on the books are dead letter unless they are vigorously enforced. And the Department of Justice, the AT&F, Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms and Explosives Agency, which has jurisdiction here, should be permitted to share more information. Right now there are amendments on the books that prohibit effective enforcement. And it may seem like technical details, but vastly important. And you're absolutely right. More resources, more support. And I hope that the kinds of outcry that we've seen will be translated into money for the Department of Justice as well as other kinds of support.
Senator Richard Blumenthal with us this morning. We could talk about this all morning. It's fascinating, and we'll see. I'd hate to think we have to wait 5 years to have some kind of actual tangible change, but maybe it comes to that. Nice to have you with us. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.